Hi guys, whenever I go for site visits, I find some mistakes that may be very small, but those are very essential to be corrected. This time I have found that a few mistakes on column starters that may impair the structural integrity, so I decided to make a video about that. Column starter is a small concrete element that comes above the slab and below the columns. The column starter shall be of 50 mm to 150 mm. For me, column starter shall be at least 75 mm thick, then only it will have the same strength as the column above. If you ask me, column starter is not required since it makes one more joint in the columns, but it is unavoidable since it has many advantages. The key advantages are, it is easier to set up and check the center line of the starter as compared to that of the column. Sometimes the column formwork turns out to be skewed, but with the column starter, this issue can be reduced completely. Layout of columns can be arranged and checked the dimensions very easily with the starters. But at the side, there are plenty of mistakes happening on the column starter. Let me go through them one by one. First one is dry out the starter concrete with the cement powder. If contractors don't have sufficient numbers of starter mold, they want to remove the molds immediately after putting the concrete. For that, concrete shall be dried off immediately. To dry out the concrete, some people use cement powder to absorb the water from the concrete. When cement powder is added to the green concrete, the water cement ratio of the green concrete is affected, which leads to premature setting that affects the concrete strength and leads to thermal cracks. If the column starter does not have sufficient concrete strength as the column above, the starter will fail during the loading. The second one is minimum thickness of the column starter. I have seen on many sites that the thickness of the starter was provided 30 mm or even lesser. The column starter shall be at least 75 to 150 mm thick. Otherwise, aggregate of the concrete will not be arranged correctly. If the ingredients of the concrete are not arranged correctly, the particular portion of the column starter will have a weaker section that leads to cracking during column concreting and loading. The third one is mixing type. Since the required quantity of the concrete is very less, concrete may be prepared by hand mixing, which affects the concrete strength and leads to cracking during column concreting and loading. Fourth one is poor vibration or compaction. Since the thickness of the starter is very less, mechanical vibrators cannot be used to achieve the vibration. In this case, concrete shall be tamped by a suitable rod to achieve compaction. Otherwise, concrete strength would be very lesser than the column concrete. The fifth one is poor site preparation. I have observed on many sites that the parent concrete was not prepared correctly before the starter concrete. In such cases, the bond between the parent concrete and starter concrete will be affected. The sixth one is insufficient curing. Immediate after the starter concrete, the column concrete will be made on next day only. In such cases, sufficient curing will not be achieved for the starter concrete. If done so, the starter concrete may be damaged during the column concreting or removal of column forms. The seventh one is concrete with less coarse aggregate. I have observed the same issue on many sites that starter concrete had very less coarse aggregate since the mixing was done by hand. If done so, that particular concrete has more shrinkage stress than the column concrete. In such situation, starter concrete may lead to cracking. Column starter is a small element but big space for mistakes. These are small mistakes for seeing, but these mistakes will affect the durability of the structures deeply. So make sure that don't use dry cement to dry out the concrete and prepare the concrete always by machine mixing and provide at least 75 mm thickness. As far as the compaction is concerned, make sure that the sufficient tamping is done and make sure that the starter concrete is cured properly before the column concrete. Guys, I hope this video was very useful for you. I will come back to you with another engineering video. Until then, bye.